Welcome back to the deep dive. For anyone who follows cinematic history, the phrase lost film, it just carries this really profound, almost haunting weight, doesn't it? Today, we're starting a fascinating, sometimes pretty heartbreaking deep dive into the staggering reality of how much of our cinematic past has just vanished. And crucially, the incredible, often kind of miraculous effort to recover what remains.
It is a truly monumental challenge. When we talk about lost films, we're not just discussing a few forgotten curiosities. The statistics are, frankly, shocking. It's estimated that something like 90% of all silent films, those really foundational works of cinema, are considered lost.
90%, that's almost unbelievable.
It is. And to make it even clearer, some sources claim that up to 75% of all American silent films are just gone. Imagine, losing three-quarters of anything significant: recorded music, literature, architectural plans. It's a massive hole in our collective cultural memory. A huge part of our history disappeared.
That really paints a picture of immense, almost unfathomable loss. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Why? Why did so much just vanish? And what does it all mean for us today? So our mission for this deep dive is to try and unpack exactly why so many of these cinematic treasures disappeared in the first place. Then we'll pivot to the incredible, often really serendipitous stories of their rediscovery. And finally, we'll explore the intricate, really painstaking processes involved in actually bringing these fragments of history back to life for you, the modern audience. It's a journey through, well, history, chemistry, business, and maybe most importantly, just sheer human determination.
Okay, so to really get a handle on why so much was lost, we absolutely have to start with the fundamental technical reason, the actual material early films were made from. Cellulose nitrate film stock.
Right. Nitrate, I've heard it was flammable, but...
Oh, it was way beyond just flammable, wood or paper. It was dangerously unstable. A literal ticking time bomb sitting in archives all over the world. See, nitrate film, when it burns, it generates this incredibly intense heat. We're talking around 1,700 degrees Celsius.
1,700 C, that's hotter than lava, isn't it?
Exactly. And what's truly terrifying, and this is a crucial point, is that a nitrate fire can't be put out with normal methods. Not water, not foam, not even sand. Because unlike a regular fire needing oxygen from the air, nitrate film releases its own oxygen as it burns.
Wow, so it fuels itself.
Precisely. It's a chemical reaction that feeds on itself, making it almost impossible to smother once it really gets going.
Yeah.
It can even spontaneously ignite under certain conditions or just explode.
That's chilling. I mean, just imagining archives literally filled with ticking time bombs. That must have led to, well, intentional destruction, right? Just for safety.
Absolutely. It's a terrible choice to have to make. Imagine having to say, this piece of history, possibly irreplaceable, is just too dangerous to keep.
Mm-hmm.
And the danger wasn't just theoretical, it was horrifyingly real. There were numerous catastrophic nitrate fires that wiped out huge collections.
Like the Fox Vault fire.
That's probably the most infamous one. 1937, New Jersey. It destroyed almost all of Fox Film Corporation's silent and early sound films. An estimated 40 million feet of film gone, including works by huge stars like Theda Bara, early John Ford films, just incinerated.
40 million feet.
And it wasn't isolated. 1965, another major fire, the George Eastman House in Rochester, New York, a really important archive. More classics lost. It was just this constant looming threat over every single collection.
So when did they finally stop using it?
Well, the industry did eventually recognize the danger. In Western Europe and North America, they mostly transitioned away from nitrate around 1951. They switched to safer acetate stock. You often hear it called safety film. But, and this is important, the shift wasn't uniform everywhere. Some countries, like the UK, kept using nitrate into the 60s. Places like China and the Soviet Union used it even later. So large-scale losses continued in those regions much later into the 20th century. This material vulnerability was this constant, inherent, devastating threat for decades.
Okay, so the dangerous material itself is a huge factor. But what about the mindset? You hear stories about the early film industry. Did they even want to preserve these films? Did they see the value?
That's a really vital question, and it brings us straight to the second major reason for all this loss, the attitude of the early film industry. Back then, studios and filmmakers, for the most part, they viewed movies not as lasting art or history, but as purely commercial products. Think of them like newspapers or maybe a stage play that runs for a few weeks and then it's done. They had a very limited shelf life in the eyes of the business.
So a real lack of foresight.
A glaring lack of foresight, yeah. And it had truly devastating consequences. The economic logic was pretty simple, if harsh. If a film wasn't making money right now or its theatrical run was over, why bother keeping it? especially when storing it was expensive and, as we just discussed, incredibly dangerous.
They weren't thinking long-term at all.
Not in the way we think about archives today, no.
Hmm.
This commercial mindset led to a whole range of, well, destructive business practices that just made the problem worse. First, just a basic lack of preservation priority. Once a film wasn't commercially viable, studios saw little reason to pay for storage and upkeep. These expensive, dangerous nitrate reels, often just allowed to sit in forgotten vaults and literally rot, disintegrate into dust. Or they were actively destroyed to free up valuable storage space for new films that were expected to make money. There wasn't really a concept of a dedicated film archive within the studios back then. It was all about the cycle of production and disposal.
And ownership was complicated too, right?
Very complicated. That's the second point. Distribution and ownership were often a mess. The original producers might sell off distribution rights to smaller regional companies.
Yeah.
Or the copyrights would just lapse over time. Ownership could then transfer to individuals, maybe family heirs who might not have the money or the interest or, frankly, even the know-how to preserve the films properly. This fractured ownership made tracking down and saving films incredibly difficult. The master elements for one film could be scattered all over the place, with nobody really responsible for its long-term survival.
So if a film wasn't earning, it was often just left to decay, or worse, actually taken apart.
Precisely. And that leads to a third factor: reuse and destruction. Films were literally chopped to ribbons. Sections with impressive footage, big tidal waves, explosions, dramatic landscapes, they'd cut these out and splice them into other, often lower-budget movies or serials. A famous example is the amazing tidal wave footage from a 1933 disaster film called Deluge. It kept showing up in later Republic Pictures serials like King of the Rocket Men.
So audiences were seeing bits of a lost film without even realizing it?
Exactly. They were seeing fragments repurposed. This sort of cannibalization meant that even if a film wasn't totally lost, its original artistic integrity, its full story, was often just destroyed. And fourth, you had legal issues creating roadblocks. Complex ownership and distribution rights could make films totally inaccessible. Think about films produced by someone like Howard Hughes, the eccentric billionaire. He was known for being incredibly controlling, often litigious. Sometimes studios would just give up on his films rather than deal with the legal nightmare needed to preserve or re-release them. The legal battles could literally outlast the physical film itself.
That idea of a one-time performance, treating film as purely ephemeral, it just seems so short-sighted now. Was that unique to early movie, or did you see that happen with other new media back then, like maybe early television?
That's a great parallel, and absolutely. The one-time performance mentality wasn't just for movies. It was deeply embedded in early broadcasting, too. In the early days of TV, broadcast tapes were wiped and reused constantly. Tape was expensive, storage space was limited, and the dominant view was that a TV show, like a live play, was for that one viewing. It wasn't really thought of as something to be archived forever.
Like the BBC wiping Doctor Who episodes.
Exactly. The BBC famously wiped countless original master tapes of Doctor Who in the 60s and 70s. And not just Doctor Who, but classic comedies, dramas, huge painful gaps in their archive now. It was driven by the economics and practicalities of the time, but it meant beloved episodes were just gone. The same thing happened with early radio broadcasts. It really shows how new media are often treated as disposable at first, before people fully grasp their historical and cultural value. And beyond the material and the business side, you also had creative and political interventions causing films to vanish or get severely changed. Directors often didn't have final cut. Studios could just re-edit films, sometimes drastically, to suit what they thought audiences wanted, or to meet censorship standards like the Hays Code. Think about Orson Welles' masterpieces like The Magnificent Ambersons or Touch of Evil.
Right, both were heavily cut by the studios against his wishes.
Drastically altered. Original footage just lost forever. People are still trying to piece together Welles's intended versions from what's left, even today. And we're not talking about minor trims here. We're talking about changes that fundamentally altered the story and the artistic vision.
Those are such incredibly frustrating examples. I mean, Erich von Stroheim's Greed from 1924, you read about it being this meticulously crafted 8-hour epic, and then MGM just hacks it down to barely over 2 hours for release.
Brutally cut. The remaining 6 hours, a huge chunk of a landmark film, is presumed totally lost, maybe the single greatest artistic loss in cinema history. And his only sound film, Walking Down Broadway, suffered a similar fate, just ripped apart by Fox.
And it wasn't always the studios, was it? What about Welles's It's All True? That wasn't really cut by the studio in the same way, was it?
It's All True is another heartbreaking story, but it shows a different kind of loss, the loss of an unreleased, incomplete project. It was this ambitious color documentary Wells was shooting in South America right after Citizen Kane. But RKO, the studio, pulled the plug, withdrew funding, scrapped the whole thing. Thousands of feet of uncut footage, including the only color footage Wells ever shot, just got scattered. It ended up as unidentified stock footage in other, often obscure, Latin American thrillers. It was never seen as the cohesive work Wells intended, and the original material just became hopelessly dispersed.
And even the filmmakers themselves could cause films to disappear, like Chaplin.
Yeah, even the legendary figures. Charlie Chaplin, usually known for his meticulous control, he mysteriously suppressed his own film, The Seagull. He directed it in the late 1920s, took the print home after finishing it, and just never released it. Its actual existence is now doubtful. It shows how even a creator's own choices, or private reasons we'll never know, could lead to a film just vanishing from public view, possibly forever.
This is all pretty stark. It begs the question, though. Are films still being lost today? You'd think with digital tech, preservation would be simpler, almost automatic. Just save the file, right? But it sounds like that's not really the case.
That's a really important question for the digital age, and the answer, unfortunately, is yes. Films are still being lost. Now, physical decay of cellulose isn't the main worry for new productions, things that are born digital. But the digital age brings a whole new set of challenges, maybe even more insidious ones. You've got things like file corruption, data rot, that's where digital information just degrades over time, bit errors, storage media failing, and maybe the biggest one, technological obsolescence.
Meaning the hardware or software needed to play the file just doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly. Software and hardware evolve so fast. Think about trying to read a floppy disk today, or play a video file in some proprietary format from 15 years ago that no current software supports. It means you need constant vigilance, regular backups, redundant backups at different physical locations, proactive migration strategies, moving files to new, stable formats before the old ones become obsolete. It's this continuous, expensive race against time and technology to stop today's digital films becoming tomorrow's lost treasures. And then there's this other, really disturbing trend we've seen lately, films being completed, finished, ready to go, and then deliberately lost because of corporate decisions. Often it's for financial reasons, like tax write-offs, rather than actually letting the public see the film.
Right, we've seen some high-profile examples of that recently.
We have, but it's happened before too. Think about Adarna, the mythical bird from 1997. Historically significant, the first full-length animated film from the Philippines. It was finished, but apparently due to bad reviews and some internal controversy, it just never got a formal release. It basically vanished despite existing. Or Cyberworld from 2000, groundbreaking back then, the first 3D animated film in IMAX. But there were never plans for a home video release, so its availability was massively limited. Empress Chung, 2005, a really unique collaboration between South and North Korea on an animated film. Very few screenings, no international theatrical release, no home media. Again, basically inaccessible even though it's a finished work.
And the more recent Warner Bros. Discovery cases really brought this whole issue into the spotlight, didn't they? Treating films purely as assets.
They absolutely did, and it sparked a huge debate in the film world. Scoob, Holiday Haunt from 2022, Coyote vs. Acme from 2023, both completed animated films, known characters, and they were just shelved by Warner Bros. Discovery, reportedly for tax write-offs. The outcry was intense. Are films just assets on a balance sheet to be exploited or deleted for financial gain? Or are they cultural works that deserve to be seen and preserved? It's a stark reminder that even fully produced digital content is still vulnerable, not just to tech issues, but to cold corporate calculations.
It's not just completed films being shelved either, is it? Projects just disappear.
Right. We've seen projects simply cease to exist before they're even finished or released. That CGI remake of Yellow Submarine that was talked about around 2009, 2011, canceled after significant development. Or Yuri on Ice the movie, Ice Adolescence, which was announced back in 2017, supposedly in production for years, and then in 2024, just canceled.
Yeah.
Gone. And it's not just big features. Think about digital-only content, like web series on YouTube. The Wolfu the Adventurer series was apparently planned for 2025, but then reports suggested it might just be deleted, vanishing from the internet without a physical trace. So the threat of loss, it looks different now. The mechanisms are different, but it's definitely still ongoing, still very much here.
Okay, so despite these massive systemic losses we've been talking about, there is a flip side. And honestly, this is where it gets really interesting. The incredible stories of films reappearing against all odds. It's like finding buried treasure, sometimes in the most unbelievable places. It kind of gives you hope, doesn't it? That maybe not everything is lost forever.
It absolutely does. And these stories, they're like the lifeblood for film archives. They fuel the work of preservationists. Take The Death of Poor Joe from way back in 1901. It holds the title of the earliest known Charles Dickens adaptation on film. It was given to the British Film Institute, the BFI, in 1954. But then somehow it got mislabeled as being from 1902. Because of that little error, it kind of slipped under the radar, got forgotten in the archive. It wasn't properly discovered and recognized for what it was until 2012 by a curator named Brian E. Dixon. That small mistake paradoxically kept it safe for almost 60 years.
Wow, hidden in plain sight almost.
Almost. Then there's, different from the others, a truly groundbreaking German film from 1919. It dared to depict homosexuality as natural. It was banned by the government, and later the Nazis specifically targeted it for destruction, calling it degenerate art. But in this incredible act of foresight and, frankly, bravery, Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld, who was a pioneering sexologist and also starred in and co-wrote the film, he secretly saved about 40 minutes of footage. He did it by embedding it within another later educational work he made called Laws of Love.
So he hid it inside another film.
Essentially, yes.
Right.
This hidden footage eventually turned up in the Russian Film Archives, Gosfilmofond, in 2011. It allowed a significant chunk of this vital film, this really rare early cinematic plea for tolerance, to be restored and seen again. It's just a profound story of resistance through preservation.
That's extraordinary, defying censorship like that. And then you have the almost legendary rediscovery of The Passion of Joan of Arc, right? From 1928. A true masterpiece.
That's maybe the most famous rediscovery story of all. Carl Theodor Dreyer's The Passion of Joan of Arc. It was considered lost for decades, a real holy grail for cinephiles. The original negative was apparently destroyed in a fire shortly after its premiere, but then, miraculously, a complete, pristine Danish print turned up in 1981.
Where was it again? Somewhere totally unexpected.
In the janitor's closet of a mental hospital in Norway.
A janitor's closet. Seriously, how did it even get there?
Nobody knows, no record, no paperwork, no logical explanation for how it ended up in this closet in a Norwegian mental hospital. Its discovery was just seismic in the film preservation world. It allowed the complete, unaltered version of what many now call one of the greatest films ever made to be restored and celebrated. The world literally gained a masterpiece back overnight. And then there are even stranger finds, like the Lon Chaney Sr. film The Oubliette from 1914. All three reels were found in really excellent condition in 1983 by a couple in Georgia. They were rebuilding their front porch steps.
Wait, under their porch?
Literally buried beneath their front porch steps. Still in the metal cans. Imagine finding that a Lon Chaney film lost for nearly 70 years, just sitting in your house.
That is absolutely incredible. It makes you wonder what else is hiding under people's floorboards or in attics.
Truly. And Charlie Chaplin pops up again in these stories. A Thief Catcher, 1914, a rare early film where he had just a small part. It was found at an antique sale in Michigan in 2010. Someone bought it for $5.
$5. Amazing.
Even Orson Welles gets rediscovered. Too Much Johnson, that lost silent comedy he made in 1938 for a play. It was thought to have burned up in a fire at his home in Spain in 1971, but nope. Footage turned up in Pordenone, Italy in 2013 and got restored. Film prints just travel in mysterious ways.
They really do. What about Wake and Fright, that Australian film?
Ah, yes, Wake and Fright, 1971. A really powerful, acclaimed Australian film. Brutally honest. It got a limited, controversial release and then just kind of vanished, thought lost for years. But its editor, Anthony Buckley, he just refused to give up. He searched, and through sheer persistence, he tracked down the original negatives. They were in a shipping container in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, labeled for destruction.
No way. He got there just in time.
Literally, just in time to save it from being incinerated. It's an astonishing story of one person's dedication and just how close some films came to being lost forever. And a more recent, really curious one, Krenatelli, the 1991 Soviet TV adaptation of The Lord of the Rings.
I heard about that, the one with Tom Bombadil.
That's the one. It was broadcast only once in the Soviet Union, then completely forgotten, thought lost for 30 years. Then in 2021, the successor to the TV channel that aired it just uploaded to YouTube. And suddenly, here was this surprisingly faithful, if low-budget, adaptation, including scenes like Tom Bombadil and Goldberry that Peter Jackson famously left out of his big-budget trilogy, a remarkable glimpse into an alternate reality of filmmaking. These chance finds are incredible, right? But it's also important to see how the global film distribution system itself, kind of paradoxically, ended up being an accidental preservation method.
How so? By spreading them out.
Exactly. Prints were sent further and further out to what distributors called the end of the line. Distant countries, small regional cinemas. Eventually, they'd just be forgotten in these remote places. And these locations, maybe they had more stable climates or less commercial pressure to junk old films. They sometimes provided conditions that inadvertently protected the films from the very things destroying them back in the big city archives.
So the act of trying to squeeze every last dollar out of a film by sending it everywhere actually helped save some of them by scattering them far away from the danger zones. That's a fascinating irony.
It really is. And certain places, because they were these end-of-the-line spots, have turned out to be amazing treasure troves. Dawson City up in Canada's Yukon Territory, that's the most famous one. In 1978, a construction crew digging up an old swimming pool found 372 silent-era nitrate films.
Buried under a swimming pool, how did that preserve them?
The permafrost.
Yeah.
And being buried created this low-oxygen environment. It acted like a natural, if totally accidental, cold storage vault. Perfect conditions for nitrate. New Zealand was another key end-of-the-line place. That's where they found John Ford's lost film Upstream from 1927 in a vault in Christchurch.
And Russia, too, you mentioned, for American films.
Yes, surprisingly, the Russian State Archives, Gosfilmofond, turned out to be an unexpected haven for many lost American silent films. In the early Soviet era, they imported and showed a lot of American movies. Then later, maybe taste changed or political tensions rose, the films were just stored away and forgotten. Decades later, archivists found these prints, often in remarkably good condition. This led to big projects to digitize them and send copies back to places like the U.S. Library of Congress, letting them recover a significant piece of their lost heritage.
So international cooperation is key here.
Absolutely vital. Think about the huge restoration of Fritz Lang's Metropolis in 1927. That was pieced together using footage found in prints from Buenos Aires in Argentina and from New Zealand. Or Disney's Poor Papa, 1927, an early Oswald the Lucky Rabbit cartoon. Incomplete copies were found in the UK, but then a complete one turned up in a private collection. They combined them to bring the full cartoon back. It's like a giant global jigsaw puzzle.
It's clear these accidental finds and the end-of-the-line discoveries are amazing, but they're only part of the picture. The other really crucial part is the people, right? The archivists, the curators, the dedicated collectors. This isn't just luck. There's systematic effort involved, sometimes almost like detective work.
You're absolutely right. It's not just luck. Organizations like the American Film Institute, the AFI, have been crucial. They maintain these preliminary rescue lists, basically cinematic most wanted lists of films they're actively hunting for. And their work often involves what someone once described as a miniature CIA operation.
A CIA operation. How so?
Well, it starts conventionally enough. You contact the studios, the official archives like MoMA or George Eastman House, see if they have a copy or any leads. But if that draws a blank, you often have to go underground. That means reaching out to private collectors. These are passionate film fans, hobbyists, who over the years have acquired rare prints, often 16mm reduction prints, smaller copies made from the original 35mm or sometimes lower quality dupes, copies made from other copies. And these collectors often hold the only known surviving copies of certain films.
But dealing with private collectors must be tricky. Legally, maybe.
It's extremely tricky. That's where the delicate negotiation comes in. Many collectors are hesitant to come forward because the legal ownership of the films they have is often murky, to say the least. They usually don't hold the actual rights. So the AFI came up with this really ingenious approach. They arranged for the collector to lend their rare print to the Library of Congress. Now, once a film enters the Library of Congress collection, it legally becomes federal property. This protects the original print. The original studio or rights holder can't just seize it back. Then, the AFI funds the expensive, careful process of copying the film onto modern, stable acetate stock, creating a permanent preservation copy. And once that's done, the original print is quietly returned to the collector.
So everyone wins, kind of. The film is saved, a permanent copy exists, and the collector gets their print back and stays protected.
Exactly. It ensures a permanent copy exists for the future, even if it can't be immediately released publicly due to rights issues. And it respects the collector's role while navigating the legal minefield. It requires incredible tact, secrecy, building trust, because collectors often fear losing their treasures or facing legal trouble. It's a testament to the dedication on both sides that this works. And it's not just the AFI. You have major institutions like the British Film Institute, BFI, the Cinémathèque Française in Paris, the Bundesarchiv in Germany, and countless others worldwide. They're all diligently searching, acquiring, preserving films. They collaborate on complex international restorations, share expertise, and work tirelessly, often with limited budgets, to safeguard our shared cinematic past.
It's a truly global network of passionate people.
So, bringing this all together, what does it mean for the future? We've heard about the losses, the amazing finds. It all points to this critical, ongoing need for structured professional preservation, right? Which raises the big question for all of us. How do we stop this kind of loss from happening again, especially now with digital technology having its own challenges?
That really is the crucial question. And thankfully, the global film archive community had developed some robust answers. The International Federation of Film Archives, FIAF, is the key global body. They've developed these comprehensive preservation best practice guidelines. They serve as the international gold standard for film archives everywhere. And what these FIAF guidelines really emphasize is that film preservation has moved beyond just being a passion project. It's now a rigorous, multidisciplinary science, and importantly, an ethical commitment. It's not just about saving old reels anymore. It's about ensuring future generations have access to the full spectrum of human experience that's been captured on film, and providing a blueprint for protecting films still being made today. These guidelines break down the whole complex process into 6 key interconnected stages.
Okay, 6 stages. What's the first one?
Stage 1 is acquisition. This is the crucial starting point. Getting hold of the best possible materials for preservation. That might be the original camera negative, the sound elements, maybe digital masters for newer films, or sometimes just the best surviving presentation print if everything else is lost. The goal is always to get the highest quality, most complete version you can find, ideally reflecting the filmmaker's original intent. Archives need clear written policies for both acquisition and deaccession. That's the formal process for removing something from the collection to make sure they're acquiring things systematically and responsibly, often prioritizing films most at risk or culturally significant.
Right, so it's about being selective and strategic about what you bring in and having a plan for it. Makes sense. What's stage 2?
Stage 2 is conservation. This is all about the direct, physical safeguarding of the original materials you've acquired, protecting them from damage, decay, loss, and the single most important factor here, a cold and dry storage environment. It's amazing the difference it makes. For example, storing film at just 5 degrees Celsius, that's about 41 Fahrenheit, and 35% relative humidity, can extend its expected lifespan from maybe a few decades to potentially 500 years.
500 years, wow.
It's incredible. But conservation isn't just temperature and humidity. It's also meticulous physical handling procedures, regular inspections for any signs of trouble like mold or shrinkage, and comprehensive collection management. And a critical principle, original elements should never be cut or altered, ever. They should only be deaccessioned, removed, if their instability, like advanced nitrate decomposition, poses a direct threat to everything else. And even then, only after very careful thought, because who knows? New restoration tech might emerge later that could save it. Original elements are unique, irreplaceable. Okay, stage 3 is preservation. This is the technical process of actually duplicating, copying, or migrating the film onto new, more stable supports or formats. This is especially vital when the original is fragile or has a limited lifespan, like nitrate film. Authenticity here is absolutely paramount. You have to maintain the original image quality, the correct frame ratio, the aspect ratio. No quality loss is acceptable beyond what's absolutely unavoidable in the copying process itself, whether it's analog duplication or digital migration. This needs highly specialized staff, labs with precisely calibrated equipment, and just an unwavering focus on quality and safety. It's about creating faithful, high-quality copies designed to last for the very long term, often onto modern polyester film stock or into high-res digital files.
Okay, I think I get the distinction. Conservation is about protecting the original physical thing, keeping it safe. Preservation is about making a new, stable copy of that original thing. That makes sense. What comes after preservation?
You've got it, exactly. Next up, stage 4, restoration. This is often the most complex stage, and it's really where science meets art. Restoration can mean carefully duplicating an original element while meticulously removing or disguising damaged scratches, tears, shrinkage from nitrate decay. Or, sometimes much more challenging, it can mean recreating a more complete version of a work using incomplete pieces, maybe assembling different versions found in archives scattered around the world. Restoration needs a really strong theoretical and historical grounding. You need to know as much as possible about the film's original production, its historical context, what the filmmaker intended. And because subjective decisions are often unavoidable, like which version is definitive, how do you reconstruct missing frames, how do you restore faded color accurately if there's no reference? Every restoration project must be meticulously documented. every step, every decision. And crucially, the process needs to be reversible. You don't alter the original elements themselves. That way, if better techniques or new source materials emerge later, future restorers can always go back to the originals. The goal is to create a new, stable set of elements, as close to the original vision as possible, ready for long-term preservation. Then we get to stage 5, access. Ultimately, this is why we do all the other work: conservation, preservation, restoration. It's all done so that films can be accessible to researchers, students, the general public. But access has to be carefully managed to protect these incredibly fragile, often unique collections. Archives have to clearly distinguish between their master elements, the unique, irreplaceable originals held under the tightest security, and access elements, which are copies made specifically for people to watch and handle without putting the master at risk. Policies dictate exactly how each type of element can be used. You have to recognize that sometimes even a single surviving release print might effectively become the master element if everything else is gone. So access to masters is very tightly controlled, ideally only happening within the archive itself, with strict limits like how many times you can run an original negative through a printer to make new copies. It's this constant balancing act. Protect the past, but make it available.
Right, it's that crucial balance, enabling people to see these films, study them, enjoy them, but also making sure they're protected for future generations too. Okay, and the 6th and final stage.
The 6th and final stage is presentation. This is about making sure that when a film is actually shown, whether it's screened in a cinema or streamed online, it adheres to those principles of authenticity we talked about. That means showing it with its original frame rate, its original aspect ratio, respecting how the filmmaker composed the shots and how it was meant to be seen. It's about trying to recreate the original viewing experience as closely as possible. Yes, some translation to modern platforms is often necessary. You have to digitize a silent film to stream it, for instance. Technology changes. But even these modern presentations should always strive to uphold that core authenticity. It's about honoring the filmmaker's original artistic vision and the historical context in which the film was made, whether it's a silent film from 100 years ago or a digital feature finished last week.
What's really fascinating here is thinking about how these principles, which seem kind of timeless, adapt to our current world. We're deep in the digital age now, and that brings, as you said, incredible solutions, but also totally new problems for film heritage, quite different from just worrying about nitrate catching fire.
Indeed. Digitization has become absolutely indispensable for modern preservation. There's no question. It helps preserve the original physical materials by creating stable digital copies. These copies can then be easily backed up, duplicated, migrated to new formats as needed. And maybe just as importantly, it vastly improves access and distribution. A high-resolution digital file can be shared around the world relatively easily. It reaches audiences, researchers who might never get a chance to see a physical print. It breaks down those old geographical barriers to access.
But it's not a magic bullet, is it? The digital stuff needs preserving, too.
Exactly. It's crucial to stress that film preservation isn't just for the old classics. It absolutely must extend to contemporary films being made right now. We need to ensure that future generations can study and understand today's filmmaking, how our current society sees itself on screen. And those challenges of digital preservation we touched on: file corruption, data rot, hard drives failing, format obsolescence happening so fast, they mean you need constant vigilance. Regular backups, geographically dispersed backups, robust strategies for migrating data to new formats before the old ones die out. It's all vital if we want to prevent today's digital films from becoming tomorrow's lost treasures. The work is never really finished. It's a perpetual commitment.
What an extraordinary journey we've taken today. We've looked at the heartbreaking, almost unimaginable scale of the losses, but also the exhilarating, sometimes truly miraculous discoveries that define so much of film history. From that incredibly volatile nitrate film that literally burned through parts of our past, wiping out countless stories, to the intricate, high-stakes dance of managing modern digital files, the story of film preservation is just one of tireless dedication, often by unseen heroes working away quietly in archives around the world. It really feels like a testament to this enduring human desire to save stories, doesn't it? To preserve a record of who we are, how we've seen the world.
And if you connect it to the bigger picture, it really highlights the profound importance of cinema itself. F.W. Murnau, the great German director, he once put it so beautifully. He said, "Cinema is the creation of memory, a memory that will neither blur nor fade." And the ongoing, relentless work of film preservation, whether it's painstakingly restoring a nitrate print found in some forgotten vault, or diligently migrating today's digital files onto the next generation of storage, it ensures that this collective memory, captured first on celluloid and now in pixels, continues to enrich how we understand our past.
and just as importantly, how it inspires our future. It lets us connect with voices and visions across time, feel linked to those who came before us.
It truly does. So as you listening reflect on this deep dive, maybe consider this. What stories from our shared past captured on film might still be out there waiting to be found in some forgotten corner, maybe under a porch or mislabeled in an archive? And what role do we, as people who watch and love movies, play in supporting these crucial efforts to safeguard our shared heritage? Every time you watch a restored classic, every conversation you have about a rediscovered gem, every moment you take to appreciate these artifacts, it reinforces the immense value of this ongoing, vital work.